Hello and welcome back to Vox Terra, and if you have not done so yet, please do subscribe to my channel and click that notification bell so you know when I up a new video. Today is part 1 of the history of COP26, and I will be touching upon the fossil fuel petrochemical interests which have helped undermine these climate-related conventions. Now, I will primarily be citing to you from the Sierra Club, what is COP26 and why does it matter? November 1st of 2021. Well, COP26 or COP26 stands for Conference of the Parties, meaning the parties who are signatories to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, or by acronym UNFCCC, which could be pronounced the F word, as in we need to get un-F'd. Now, these annual conferences were established in 1992 at what is often referred to as the Rio Earth Summit, a United Nations Conference on Environment and Development, or UNCED, UNCED, held in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, June 1992. Now, this conference that led to the creation of these COPs acknowledged the threat from global climate change and acknowledged the human role in the adding to the greenhouse gases that are trapping more heat and heating our planet. Human added greenhouse gases increasing the atmospheric concentration of greenhouse gases. But the wording was a little vague and then it didn't always spell out the role of fossil fuels, but simply referred to human addition. Now, President Bush Sr. signed that convention, but he insisted on the removal of any language that made emissions cuts mandatory, presumably because that would be a bummer to the fossil fuel petrochemical interests. Now, keep in mind that Bush Sr. and the Bushes have plenty of oil and gas industry ties. Well, the third COP, or COP3, gave birth to what was called the Kyoto Protocol, and that was in 1997. And it was the first legally binding treaty intended to combat the, quote, dangerous human interference in the climate system, but it only bound developed nations. Now, as Sierra Club and the protocol itself point out, that's because the developed nations are responsible for the lion's share of carbon emissions historically. But as I will show you in my next video, part 2, that was also a ploy of the fossil fuel interests in undermining that agreement. Well, that there Kyoto Protocol called for countries to reduce their emissions by 5% compared to 1990 levels between 2008 and 2012. Well, when Bush Jr., also tied to the fossil fuel petrochemical industries, came to office, he walked away from that Kyoto Protocol. But all the same, let's take a look at how the U.S. did in terms of its emissions. So according to an EPA chart, which I will post a link to in the description section of this video, depicting carbon at top in red, U.S. emissions were steadily rising until 2008, then took a large dip momentarily. Coincidentally, when President Obama was elected, as well as the 2008 recession occurred. Well, emissions began to rise again after 2008. Now, it was during the Obama administration that COP21 in 2015 came into being, which gave birth to the Paris Agreement, and that established emission reduction standards aimed at keeping global warming in check below 2 degrees Celsius, or 3.6 Fahrenheit, rise since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. Now, please keep in mind, as I've cited to you before from NASA, the globe has already risen 1.8 Fahrenheit since the Industrial Revolution, or 1.08 Celsius. And we can see how that is already destabilizing the climate. But preferably, that Paris Agreement called for keeping emissions rise below 1.5 Celsius, or 2.7 Fahrenheit. Well, then next, Donald Trump was elected president, also with ties aplenty to the fossil fuel petrochemical industry, and he withdrew from that Paris Agreement. Well, the Sierra Club cites to why this is so important briefly by citing the latest report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change reveals. Now, before I tell you what it reveals briefly, let me point out that those who might say, big government conspiracy, well, as I'm trying to show you, the big government conspiracy is really in the opposite direction to protect those fossil fuel interests. But all that being said, we can also cite the same dire outcomes and the dire present we are in to the U.S. climate assessment, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, NOAA, and NASA, and also the many, many years of warnings coming from environmental organizations like the Sierra Club, Natural Resources Defense Council, and the Union of Concerned Scientists, to name a few. So that their IPCC report warns that extreme weather events we're already experiencing, historic droughts, floods, superstorms, and record-breaking wildfires, unprecedented coastal flooding, will continue to rapidly worsen until the world cuts all climate pollution in half by 2030. And invest in clean energy solutions that completely end all climate pollution by 2050. So that is really what the environmental organizations are calling for, a reduction, a drastic reduction now in the use of fossil fuels. In decades past, they were calling for a more gradual reduction, but we've passed that point. A transition towards cleaner renewable energy, responsibly sited, and simply less consumption in general, and more wilderness set aside. Well, I hope you found this explanation of the COP framework helpful, and if so, please make sure you are subscribed to my channel, you've clicked that notification bell, you're looking forward to that next video, and until next time, as always, peace be with you.